Hello, everyone, and welcome to my review of Xenogears. Wow. First of all, this game is very, very long. It is 60 hours, and I saw that on, Google or whatever, and I always think, oh, I'm a good gamer. I can beat it in maybe 50, maybe 40. No, it took me 60 hours. No way getting around it. So yeah, I mean that's first off. This is a very long game, and I have a lot of things to say about it because of that. It's also one of these highly acclaimed games. You know how it is. I mean, highly acclaimed, highly talked about games. Like in hushed tones, like, oh yes, the great Xenogears. It almost feels like the War and Peace of the video game world. And now that I've fully gotten into it and I've played it, I've beaten it, and I've gotten to the end, what do I think about it? It's a very good game, but it has some issues. One of them being the fact it's 60 hours. And that's not really the issue. The issue is that of those 60 hours, how do I say it like this? I was playing up until the second disc, and I think I was about 40 or 45 hours in, and I've heard people talk about this game as a masterpiece, as a perfect example of what video games can be, an aspiration to what video games can be as an art form. And up until the end of disc one, I just thought there is no way in hell that's the case. I just thought there's it's not happening. This is not the case. It's been overhyped as hell. And then I get to disc two, and disc two is a bit of a redemption because it gets into everything that I was kind of promised and talked about this game. And so the core issue I think with Xenogears is that a lot of the content in the middle of this philosophical sandwich feels basically like filler. And there's just a lot of filler. And I find this is the case with a lot of really good pieces of media from, things like War and Peace to whatever, is that just the middle section is just bloated with stuff that doesn't matter. And then the beginning and end are just so immaculately seasoned with interesting philosophy and insight and what. So that's one thing. The other thing is that people have referred to this game as Xenogears, and I'd have to agree with them, at least in the aspect that this is a movie game. And I'm kind of laughing as I say that because it's a pixelated whatever JRPG classical style. No, it really feels like a movie game in the sense that it feels like a visual novel at times. Um, People complain about cutscenes in Metal Gear Solid. This game is mostly cutscenes. This game is mostly tapping X and then having a battle. And if it was remade today, it would be perfect for our modern audience because, well, I mean, there is definitely gameplay. And near the end of the game, it is definitely challenging. It is very hard. There are a few bosses where it took me quite a few tries to beat. I'm used to just over leveling my characters and beating everything in one hit, but no, it's like you need to use an actual strategy. It's like, all right. So, but that being said, just most of this game is reading. Just lots and lots and lots and lots of reading, which is fine because it's mostly good dialogue. It's decently written. It's just that the really well written parts are again at the beginning and end, and I was so sent for a loop because the beginning of the game has such an interesting aspect where you have this extremely introspective dialogue from the main character who's doubting himself, questioning his actions, his judgments, feeling and realizing his emotions that were behind certain actions and discovering himself and evaluating and talking about really real emotions and feelings and experiences. And that just tapers off. It completely disappears, and it just becomes back to back like political intrigue. This country's invading this country, and this faction is fighting with this faction, and we need to join this. And so again, we come back to my other point, like just the ends are polished and the middle is just kind of filler, which is just the unfortunate kind of thing here. But I mean, let's get into that filler and get into the polished sections of the game. So Xenogears, and again, this is the other thing that they could have just done this so much better, where the very opening cutscene of the game basically shows that there's an advanced civilization in space on this like spaceship, basically, and it crash lands to Earth, and all the lost technology is kind of scattered around. And that's a very cool idea. I've definitely seen it in anime like Trigun, for example, but in Trigun's case, what's really cool about it is it presents itself as a Western, but the whole fact they're descendants from an ancient lost civilization that crash landed to the planet is a really cool plot that they reveal slowly over the course of the anime. While in Xenogears, they just tell you up front, right then and there, that this is the origin story. And I really hate that, because there's so much potential to tease that out and have that element of mystery throughout the game. You're like, okay, why does their tech underground? Where did it come from? And you can speculate, oh yeah, it's come from space or whatever. But it just felt like such a missed opportunity to me. And again, the beginning of the game, there's a lot of really cool stuff they do. For example, they have this whole thing where he gets in the mech. He has this whole conflict about getting in the mech and if he should fight or not. And there's this whole thing where his main love interest and the main people in the village that you're introduced to as kind of the main cast, they all get killed. Most of them. They all get killed in that sequence, and he also has to deal with the fact that he's partially responsible for some of their deaths. And that just set the tone for like, oh my god, kind of like Game of Thrones, you don't know who's going to die in this story. If they can just kill off this character and this character, there's just nothing they won't do. And again, that whole element of suspense of who's going to die, again, tapers off. In that first few hours, they just do so many things so interestingly right, and they just kind of disappear for most of the game until the very end. Again, this whole thing, as I just mentioned, about getting into a mech to fight, but you're scared and you don't want to. I think we got to address the elephant in the room here. That I don't think I don't go searching out to see a lot of Xenogears discussion, but it's very obvious what this game is inspired by. When you have giant mechs and religious imagery and names and long interpersonal introspective conversations between characters. For years people have been asking for a good / decent game version of Neon Genesis Evangelion. And I gotta say, Xenogears is the game that you're looking for. It is exactly very much inspired by Evangelion in a lot of ways. At least in certain areas. Again, the whole middle section. To give you an overview of the game, you have the beginning area where you're in your village. The village gets attacked, of course, by some empire or whatever. Doesn't matter. Everyone dies, but the whole point, well, not everyone dies, but the whole point of that section is that the main character, Fei, he takes part in the conflict, and it's very much about why do we fight. And he doesn't want to fight, he doesn't want to kill anyone, but he has to defend himself. And so he gets in the mech, he ends up killing the bad guys, but then his mech goes, super critical, blows up part of the village, and then he's partially responsible for people's deaths. And then there's this little kid, Dan, who is the little brother of the, woman he was romantically interested in, who blames you for their deaths. And so then he says, get out of this village, we hate you. So it's very Shinji kind of thing. And like, oh yeah, there's literally a scene where it's an anime cutscene where it shows Fei's face when he's a kid and it's covered in blood, and it's literally the same shot of like little Shinji where he's looking up. And it's like one of the later episodes, but it's the same stuff. And sure enough, in the credits, the animation was done by Production IG, along with the avatars done by Studio Dean. So this is a very just, and that's one thing. So yeah, like it's totally like on Evangelion's level. But if you're gonna steal from someone, you might as well steal from the best. And Xenogears, it does do it, but again, not so much, and it does take a lot of components from it. And so this is the thing that I kind of was ramping up to later. In terms of a masterpiece in the medium, would I prefer Xenogears or Evangelion? And the answer is easily Evangelion. One, because it's not 60 hours long. It's much shorter and kind of to the point and goes a bit more in depth. And this is where it's very funny because people like to pick on Evangelion as a series where Hideaki Anno, they say, well, he just put in, why do they call them angels? Oh, because it means messenger in Greek. He's kind of joking around with you, but the reason he's saying that is because the New Testament is written in Greek. It's the point, the whole point of it is that he's going into the deep Christian lore and actually integrating the themes and ideas. So the question is, in this game, are they doing that? And the answer is kind of. They kind of. The answer is not really. I'll be honest. They do a lot of name dropping. They have things like the three wise men, or literally the three wise men are named after the three computers in Evangelion, which again are named after the three wise men in the Bible. So you have Balthazar, Casper, and the other one, Melchior. And so that, so they have that. The people in the higher civilization are called the sons of Abel. The humans on the land are called lambs. They take in again some Jungian ideas, just like Evangelion, like the anima and animus, but it's kind of like, there are humans that are compatible with each other for high revolution, and they're referred to as the animus and the anima. You have this machine from the spaceship which fell to Earth, and I will say that the origin of their machine is very interesting, because in Evangelion they have this whole thing where you have the Black Moon and Lilith and Adam, and that all humans were birthed from Lilith at this giant biomass. And Evangelion, so it has the same structure as Evangelion, but in Evangelion it doesn't give a reason for why Lilith and Adam were there, other than they were just life forms spreading their genes across the universe. And this one, it actually changes it up, where God, or Deus, is actually a rogue AI weapon / machine that was going critical, and so they sent it away on some mission to send it somewhere else or conquer another planet, because they couldn't control it. And so again, like, it's literally the same plot where Deus, the machine god, crash lands on the surface of the planet, and basically from its mechanical biomass, all of humanity are born from it. And so you have this council of elders along with an emperor guy who are all trying to recapture the ability to reconnect with God, this higher machine sentient life form, so that they can basically ascend to godhood. There's not really a whole rapture diatribe as there is in Evangelion. It's just like, yeah, we just want to become more powerful. Basically, we want to live forever. And they've been living off the ancient technology from the spaceship that crash landed, and there's these ancient mines where people find things, and those things became legends, where it talks about the giants, which are now the Omnigears. And so they're very similar to Xenoblade, which I was familiar with, where essentially you have the world is composed of these two giant gods that killed each other. Again, I really feel like the Xeno series should keep those big revelations in its pocket for when it needs them, and not just lead with that. I mean, it's kind of a bold move, but I really do think from a storytelling perspective, it would make a lot more sense to hold off on those big reveals. Anyway, So yeah, this is the whole thing, and then they also name drop that Zohar. Oh, there we go. Zohar is the kind of OS that the Deus god is operating with, and so yeah, they're just name dropping things, and it's like, yeah, and they mention things like, oh yeah, Zohar is connected now, God is connected, and the essence of light will descend to Earth. It's like, yeah, okay, that's literally like the Wikipedia page of the Zohar. That's literally what the Tree of Life is all about and what they believe and what they practice. But it's just not thematically there. I hate to say it, but it's a bunch of name dropping. What they accuse Mr. Anno of doing is literally what they're doing in Xenogears. They're just name dropping things with some relevancy. It's not completely wrong definitions. They just don't really bring it forward enough in a way that I can really be impressed. But there was something I was very impressed by, which breaks, I would say, the JRPG mold. And it's the notion or the idea of God. And why do we always kill God in JRPGs? And I've seen there's a few videos on YouTube about this topic, but they're always so woefully lacking, where their explanation for why you kill God in Japanese anime or JRPGs specifically is that they're Shinto, and because they don't think God is actually a great entity, so you can kill him. It's like, yeah, okay, that's not really an explanation. That's like a theory, really. It's more of a question: why is it always killing God, and why is it always mentioning the Zohar, the Tree of Life? Why is it always referencing all these other religious aspects? And the only thing I can say is that the creators of the very first JRPGs worked in the same milieu, in the same zones. They read the same books. And it's funny, when you look at Square in the 90s, I mean, they had Xenogears, Final Fantasy, Vagrant Story, a lot of these games. Legend of Darkroon did the similar thing, but I was Skia. Again, they were all very similar in the fact that they're all inspired by the Zohar, and they're all inspired by these ideas of God killing. And it's, again, I don't have the solution as to why that is, but just saying because they're Shinto is really an insufficient explanation. I feel like they have a very similar certain, a circle where they read the same kind of literature. Similar with Persona 3 and the Persona series in general. You can tell that the author of that story, as through one of the NPC teachers on Western esotericism and magic, definitely he's working with a certain compendium of ideas. Just like how if you play in a Capcom game, there's some Dante's Inferno reference in all of their work, just somewhere, even blatantly in the spin-off company with Bayonetta, Platinum. There, you literally have Paradiso, Purgatorio, and Inferno. Like it's funny how those ideas just permeate. So, as to whether or not Xenogears is based on the Zohar specifically, I can't really speak on that, but it's based on some sort of religious text or the Dead Sea Scrolls or whatever. But then again, it's very much inspired by Evangelion, obviously, which is definitely based on the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Zohar. Anyway, so the one mold that they really break is that in Xenogears, yes, you are killing God, literally Deus, who is a machine god thing from an alien civilization. But they actually bring in the real God into this equation, because it's always like, okay, God in these games, it's always the highest entity, the most powerful entity possible. It's just some powerful dude, just out there, like similar to the Demiurge in the Gnostic style. And you just kill him, and now you're God, and now you're the demigod, and now you are become as gods. We killed God, etc. But in Xenogears, what's very fascinating is at the end of the game, you meet this higher dimensional entity being, where he says, "Hey, and I forget, it's very convoluted, but he says, hey, because you activated Deus, or you're going to deactivate the Zohar system, which all of your ether and gears run off of, I'm actually an entity that was brought into this dimension, and I'm trapped here. And I basically need your help to defeat this machine god so I can return to my higher dimension. And it's not an antagonistic character. So for once, for one time, we have a higher dimensional being, a god-like or god type being. They never claim to be the creator of our world, so they're not our direct god, but they have a higher entity being that is just not hostile. You don't have to kill this guy. he's just here, he's chilling, he wants to go home, and you just got to help him, and it's very cool. And a lot of these things that I've been talking about, they were really introduced in the last like half hour of this game. So here's the other thing that I kind of want to get into. So that's all the higher level big brain stuff that I really appreciate, and I really think Xenogears differentiates itself by doing. That's really cool. But and maybe I think it led the template, I think, hopefully for that kind of giant god killing idea in other RPGs or JRPGs. But the issue then comes to the actual breakup of the writing. And this comes back to my original point, is that it's very disconjointed and there's a lot of filler. And not only is there a lot of filler, but just the quality, well, not the quality, but the whole aspect of these higher ideas are completely absent in the entire middle of the game. I would say from hour 15 to 50, it's all I'll give you kind of a synopsis. I mean Fei gets in his mech. He has to deal with the remorse of the killing the people, even though it wasn't his fault. And he meets this girl called Ellie, or Leham, who is from this higher civilization in this giant floating invisible city. And that's another thing about the story, is that I always thought that Solaris and what's the other one? Solaris and Shavat were the same city, because they said, oh, it's a giant floating city in the sky that no one can see. There's actually two giant floating cities in the sky. One of them is invisible and the other one isn't, and apparently you find out they're at war with each other, or were at war. Very confusing. Anyway, so Fei, again, average guy, meets this girl called Ellie. She's working for the Empire, or the higher, whatever people, and they're coordinating a war, proxy war, essentially, with the kingdoms on the surface, which are Ave and Kislev, I think. Yeah, Ave and Kislev to the north and south. And then you have Gebler, which is kind of this neutral nation, which has access to gear technology, which is allying itself with whoever is the highest bidder, basically, I think. And so you have multiple factions, multiple political things, and they have, you have a lot of just intrigue and politics and stuff. And you have this whole other aspect where it's like, okay, we're on different sides, whatever, and he meets Ellie. We're on different sides, we have to survive the forest together, and then they survive that, and they get split up, and then Fei ends up getting picked up by this sand pirate called Bart, and his official name Bartholomew, yeah, and it's funny that of all 90s property, his name is Bart, and just can't help but think of The Simpsons when this came out, I guess. And so he's kind of like your main kind of guy, besides Citan, who's the doctor. It definitely has a very high Star Trek vibe to this game, along with Star Wars and even Evangelion. There's a bunch of very sci-fi stuff that is being mixed in here. A lot of Western stuff too, which is kind of interesting. And he calls him Doc for short, right? So it's that kind of relationship between Kirk and Bones, a little bit. And so you end up getting picked up by the sand pirate Bart, and that, for me, honestly, is when the game takes kind of a downturn. Not like it gets bad, it just gets different, and it gets kind of like, okay, we're going to go on this adventure with these sand pirates, Turns out Bart is related to this ancient lineage of kings of this kingdom that have been taken over by this other guy who's being paid by, the higher civilization to do this, and he's just a pawn in their game. And so you have to take back the kingdom, and you have to go to this city and find out, this sewer, route, and like enter yourself in a fighting tournament to distract from them, the thing, and then go around and do all this other stuff. And then after that, there's you have to join the war against the kingdoms, and then you're working for Ave, and then you're working for the other one, and then you end up getting captured to Nocturne, the capital in the Kislev Empire, and then you end up having to do a bunch of mech fights, and then going to the sewer and escaping. And so you have a bunch of plot that does not affect the overall story and does not really progress the overall story. There's just so much stuff in the middle of this game that is simply just filler. It could be cut and it really wouldn't change the overall story. It's not like, during the whole sewer sequence, we're learning more about this ancient civilization that crash landed to this world and changed the people and how they work. I mean, technically you're meeting all these demi-humans, but you don't learn until the end of the game that these beast humans or demi-humans aren't naturally occurring. They're all geoengineered by DNA splicing at this giant factory, which again is at the end of the game. So it's really frustrating because the middle of this game, it just does not connect to the overall story. Stuff is just happening. And I was kind of just going through the motions by the end of disc 1. And by the start of disc 2, it takes a very, very different tone. In fact, it's actually a little bit funny as to how rushed it is. So I'll probably just skip there because, like I said, a bunch of stuff is happening. And the one thing I do have to say about the plot, though, and how it unveils, it does feel very much like an anime in a good way. Those 90s animes kind of intrigues where, again, you have all these different characters, all these different factions, all these different people with portraits and whatever. And I'm just thinking in my mind, in a typical game, if you introduce a character, it's like they're going to be a boss later on, or they're going to be a party member later on. They're going to be someone important. There are a bunch of characters here. For example, Ellie's kind of squad or strike force that, while they have a major point in the plot at some places, and they are bosses you fight, they don't ever become super duper important. They're just kind of like, it's not like I thought, okay, we're gonna have a final battle with these guys and they're gonna be supercharged and we have to defeat them once and for all. It's like, no, they actually end up joining your side. And another thing is that, you have this massive emperor guy, and you thought, okay, this guy's gonna be the final boss fight, right? No, he ends up getting betrayed by another character, and there's a bunch of other, sub-characters, the council of these other people, who end up getting betrayed by some other guy, and you don't have to fight them at all because they all die. And by the end of the game, you're like, okay, so wait, who's actually left? It's like, well, they're dead, they're betrayed, they joined our side, the other guy disappeared. So you have this giant cast of characters that's kind of hard to keep track of. And by the end of the game, you're just kind of, again, going through the motions of seeing what unveils itself. So it feels very much anime coded. It feels very much like a TV show or a saga. And again, I had the same feeling with War and Peace. And War and Peace, whenever I've seen it, it's much better interpreted as a docuseries rather than a singular movie or something, because there's so much stuff that just happens. And that being said, another thing I really, 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 really love about Xenogears is that they actually have anime cutscenes. And I'm just a sucker for that, especially 90s art style. It looks a lot more mature, a lot more dark. And when the anime cutscenes kick in, it just like, it happens. It just like the load times for some reason are just instant, and it just feels and looks so cool. It just like my brain just says, everyone shut up when an anime cutscene happens. It's just, and of course it is horribly, horribly lip synced, but it looks so cool. I give it a pass. And again, another issue with that is that I do really like those anime cutscenes, and they are few and far between. In fact, it's literally only at the beginning of the game and then there's 3 or 4 at the very end. Like, so people forget it's not just in the beginning of the game, it's also at other places. But again, the entire middle section is just devoid of any anime cutscenes. It does have CG cutscenes by the end of disc 1 and the beginning of disc 2, but the anime cutscenes are almost like an afterthought that they forgot about. And it is interesting to think about because in a way it's like, right, this is a video game and you want to kind of honor the medium that you're using, and to kind of use another medium, I understand how it feels cheap, like we're not pushing or innovating ourselves, but I do wish more games use anime cutscenes because it makes it feel so cool. It's a really cool thing because FMVs were new at the time. It's just a really, really neat thing, and I just wish there were more of it. Basically, what I want to say. But yeah, I'll quickly talk about the beginning of Disc 2 because it's almost hilarious how bad it is. It's not bad. I mean, it saves itself, but again, with it feels like a story that's being written, and they realize they're running out of time or paper or resources, and so by the end of Disc 1, you basically end up blowing up the Solarium or Solaris, this giant city. And then it's like, okay, now what? And at the beginning of Disc 2, I find this very, very odd, to be honest, because in games like Final Fantasy VII and other games, usually when you change discs, there's kind of like a time skip, like it was planned or something. No, they literally have 2 discs because it is literally picking off exactly where it left off. They just ran out of time and space on the disc. Like, they just could not fit all this story into one disc. And so it leaves off where the last game does, like literally at the exact same scene. There's not even like there is a transition, but it's like you're literally loading the transition to the next scene. It's not even like there's a fade out or like a save point. Like it's like you need to put it in just to continue. And you're like, okay, the game's continuing, but then it takes a completely different turn where they are immediately coping and worrying and panicking. Because what occurs is you have these scenes now where Fei or Citan or Ellie are sitting in an Evangelion-style chair in front of the player while they have a mural in the background, which is a, like, cutscene, not a cutscene, but it's an image. It's a still with text on the screen as to what is going on. They literally did not have time. They had so much story. They did not have time to program all this stuff they wanted to show you. So they literally did a PowerPoint slideshow from the character's perspective on what is going on and what is happening because they couldn't give it to you. And the end of Disc 2 is seriously a bunch of, there are a few dungeons, but it's a bunch of exposition and dialogue with the boss fights. It's like instead of doing the dungeon or like the pre-dungeon, overture, the intro to the dungeon, the through the dungeon, and the climax, the revelation, and the finisher with the final boss, they end up just telling you and throwing you into the boss fight. Here's a summary of what's going on. So Disc 2 is just a bunch of summary of stuff they did not have time to do. And so it's things like, the thing that's so funny about it feels so rushed. It's like, oh, by the way, there's these relics that we kind of talked about earlier. Well, there's this relic here, and this relic here, and this relic here, and they had to do all this stuff to get it. And, they had this challenge, and they had, this, and they had this boss fight. Oh, by the way, go fight the boss. And here's your gear, here's your mech or whatever. They just throw you in, like I said. There's another thing where it shows a cutscene, like a whole dungeon, like, oh yeah, we had to go through this facility to launch these satellites into space so we could activate some system. And it just shows a cutscene of it happening. It just shows it. It's like, all right, screw it. Just literally screw it. We're just doing it. So Disc 2 is hilariously rushed. it does kind of save itself because what it is describing is really cool stuff. And it almost feels like it feels literally like story mode for the game where you don't even have to go around or explore. It's just telling you what happens, which I don't know, that could be a thing for future games if, for people who really don't want to play games. There's like a summary version of it, which I think is kind of cool in a terrible way, that you don't have to play a game to really get the gist of it. And honestly, I was 45 hours in. I was like, I'm done. I just want the game to end, honestly. I'm just pushing through it. So I was more than happy to read a bunch of text summary of stuff that was happening that I did not care about, that was not relevant to the overall story. And this, again, is where we get into the good, bad part of Xenogears, where by the end of the game, you have all this exposition and all of this lore that is just so interesting and cool and heavy and deep, but it's just dumped on you as text exposition. It's so careless. I mean, it's very interesting and very cool about the Zohar system and how the Raziel computer and how everything works and all this intrigue. It's like they went hard. They were like, this is Evangelion but better, and we're putting all this stuff and intrigue in here. But it just doesn't really work as a game when it's just rushed like that. And so this is the root of my main issue with Xenogears, that Xenogears is a great game. It's a good game, but it's not a great game. And it's because it's so disjointed. If they took all of this lore about the Raziel computer, the Zohar system, the deal with the Emperor and the Council of AI entities, and the origin story of the spaceship and the lore, if they just sprinkled that lore and put it at the end of every dungeon in the 45-hour section of the middle of the game, or 30 hours or whatever, the game would be so much better. So Xenogears, it has a great story, but the storytelling of it was just butchered, honestly. It's a very poorly done job. It's almost like they had so much in their mind they couldn't organize it. It was like a first draft kind of vibe to it. And so I'm kind of conflicted because even though it's a first draft kind of situation, the art of itself as a whole and the conclusion, what it actually tells you, is really powerful and really good. And again, just the fact, like Fei and Ellie, like there's this one scene, like Fei and Ellie are kind of, I mean, they're the canon ship, they're the official relationship, and their relationship does really develop in really interesting ways, that where they get very interpersonal. They said, basically, like, I need you because I'm not as strong as I thought I was. I'm weak. It has that whole strength weakness dynamic. It's a very well done emotional relationship, and it's all at the end of the game. It drives me nuts that, like, if I finished at disc 1 and I dropped this game, I would have very little respect for Xenogears. But there's so much good stuff that is just, again, dumped at the end. And I think it's funny too, because they really do mirror Shinji and Asuka in a lot of ways. And I think why people like Fei a lot more than Shinji, I mean, I like Shinji, but it's kind of like, I understand why people don't like Shinji, because he's a character who is very weak, essentially. And it's only through being weak that he learns to become strong, kind of by the end of the game. Fei is and also Shinji's like literally 14 years old. Fei is already like 22 years old. He's a grown-ass man, but he still deals with the emotions that Shinji goes through. He's just more controlled at it. He's less of a crybaby, but he still has that component to it. So I think I understand why people would, in comparison to Evangelion in terms of characters, they would prefer Fei over Shinji. I can see that. But I definitely prefer Asuka over Ellie. And it is funny how they relate to each other, because there's one scene where Ellie has to use this drug called Drive, which is kind of like a dummy plug kind of episode thing. And the face and emotion and the still that she makes, like, it's so Asuka coded. It's not even funny. It's like, okay, I'm finding Asuka right now, where she goes crazy and whatever. It is the exact same. It's like, it's the same character in that moment. But I will say one thing, like, a lot of the characters in this game, really, they aren't like hard reminders of Evangelion. They're kind of like they are their own people. Fei is his own character. Ellie's her own character. Citan and all these other characters. You can tell they're touched and inspired, but they're not ripping off Evangelion. Guess what I'm saying. I'm still in the Xenogears mind frame. It's really the story beats and the lore that is very much, oh, that's Evangelion. Kind of like, yeah, okay, but I think they did a pretty decent job of differentiating themselves. But again, it's a very frustrating game, and in a few ways, like even by the end of the game, the final boss is, I've never seen this really done before, where you have optional sub bosses. So you have Deus, the main guy, and then you have 4 other sub bosses, which if you defeat them, you can essentially disable a component of the final boss. So things like healing, final attacks, swapping, certain characters or whatever. And so it makes the final boss fight easier. It's kind of weird though, because in the grand scope of things, so this is another thing that I just found very frustrating about this game is the gear system. Now, the gear system pretty much for combat, everything, it works fine, it's great, but it's how it levels up. And I've had multiple issues with this, is that regardless of your level, your gear is dependent on how it is built. And how you build your gear is through gil and gold or money or whatever. So it's this weird thing where if you're stuck, like the golden rule of an RPG is that if you're stuck somewhere and you can't beat the boss, you just grind. You just grind the area right before the boss that is most EXP, and then you just grind until you unlock some skill, and you can just like basically beat the boss to death. You're never really truly stuck. Xenogears, that is not the case. You need to manage your resources and basically prioritize building your gears, and the game does not really tell you this. You might figure this out by the end of the game, but if you neglect just always having the latest equipment for your gears, which is the mechs, by the way, you are going to be eating a broken teeth and tears sandwich quite often. And just to get it out of the way, I had a very bad experience with this game where it was, I think it was the second Ellie boss where the time where I think it's the first Ellie boss where you fight her and she activates her drive component. And I mean, not only the fact do you have to fight a squad of elite troops, 2 of them, and then Ellie, like you have to fight 3 bosses kind of in a row. And this is during this the offensive on Ave. And that whole thing is just frustrating too, because even though if you win that battle in the story, it actually doesn't matter because they knew you were coming, so they launched a preemptive counterattack, so it doesn't matter. But basically, this boss filtered me, and it filtered me in a very specific way, where it's like, okay, I don't have the components. This boss is way too hard. I need to buy components. The issue is that there is a repair mech / merchant mech that is literally right before this boss fight on a cliff and right before a save point. And for some reason, the devs thought it was a good idea to give a dialogue option for this bot that sells you the items you need to beat the following boss. You have an option to say, I don't trust you, and you're deep in enemy territory, and you're, doing a sneak attack mission on this. Okay? And for some reason, they put an option there. And me being the chaotic gamer that I am, I always choose the most ridiculous option. So I say, hey, I don't trust you, weird repair bot. And that activates a fight sequence. And in this fight sequence, you fight the repair bot. And you have no option to like back out or escape or whatever. You just have to kill him. And so I kill him, and I thought, well, they wouldn't be crazy enough to like block me or whatever and put a save point right there. So I decide to save after I kill this repair bot. And as it turns out, he has the equipment that I need in order to beat that boss. So, and I thought, no, there must be some strategy I can adapt. Maybe I bought some parts. I've been doing some work on my gear. There's going to be some parts I can use to buy to upgrade my gear, or some strategy that'll help me go through the boss fight and go online. I checked online. People say, yeah, if you kill that bot, that's pretty much a game wipe. So, how far into the game was I? Up until this point, you might ask. Oh, it's a good guess. Out of a 60-hour game, it's comparatively not too bad, but it was still 12 hours. That was my Tuesday and Wednesday night, 6 hours each, gone. And I at that point was seriously consider I'm just kind of done with this game for now. And of course, whenever I lose something, I try to see how fast I can get it back. And on a replay, I ended up getting that time or that same point back in about 9 hours. And it really wasn't that bad because a lot of it is just, again, I realized a lot of it is tapping X to get through dialogue. It was basically a visual novel with some RPG battles in between. Obviously, I'm not sure if I have to state it, but the game is extremely linear. Once you go to a certain area, you don't ever really come back there. And it's kind of like you just go from place to place to place. And once you've done it, you're kind of done with it. I mean, Final Fantasy VII did the same thing, but it even kind of had the decency to kind of foreshadow that it's separated by discs. So if you go to the next disc, you're basically saying goodbye to that previous world. It was pretty good at telegraphing this because between disc 1 and disc 2 opened up the overworld. But in this game, that was not the case. Because their discs are divided just by how much stuff they were putting in. So it felt like a very rushed development. Like, again, like when you go to disc 2, it's not a big transition. It's like you're in the middle of, well, actually, what it looks like. It's a pretty good ending sequence. I think it would have been a great place to have a fade to black because the end of disc 1 is the main characters get shot down and it seems like they might be dead or one of them might be dead, and it's a very suspenseful moment and you're like, oh, this would be a great thing to like, episode over or like next time on Xenogears or something. But no, it just literally picks off exactly at that scene, and it shows the wounded characters being like, oh, they're in like a nano machine back to tank and they're fine. But yeah, that's pretty much how the game is sorted out. I guess I can briefly talk on the actual RPG elements, the battles themselves. It works with a active battle system similar. No, sorry, it's very much turn based, but it still has like the active battle system. It only takes place after you've put in your input to attack. So it still shows the bars filling up and the characters attacking, but it's very strictly a turn-based game. Aside from that, the battles themselves, they're fine. I mean, games around this time, they're like, okay, we're an RPG, but we need a gimmick, right? So Legend of Dragoon, you have to do button prompts to give yourself extra damage on attacks. In this game, you basically have combos or death blows that you unlock. And so you essentially do this thing where, honestly, I felt like I never figured it out fully by the end of the game. Like, I was able to do the moves, but I thought I must be missing something. So you attack with triangle, square, and X. Each one, essentially, they in that order, they do a proportional amount of damage, from small to big. And the issue with doing the bigger attacks is that they're less accurate, so there's a higher chance to miss. However, death blows are almost guaranteed. They never miss. And what they are is if you do a certain combination, which keeps track of, if you do like square, square, triangle, square, it'll activate that specific death blow. And as you're inputting it, it'll show you a preview of the inputs you have to do, so you don't have to memorize them. And you unlock them as you use that character and use different combos and whatnot. As you're going through it, though, what's interesting or kind of unfortunate is that once you unlock the most powerful death blow, that's pretty much the only one you're using, and it makes all the other ones pretty much obsolete. There's no cost requirement, really. Even for the mechs, they do cost more, but only by such a little amount it doesn't really matter, so you're always using the most powerful attack anyway, as you just never get to see those other moves. And some of them you unlock all at once, and so you might use them once and never use them again. So it's kind of like maybe another issue. I guess the issue with death blows is that, I mean, they're fun, they're very flashy and cool looking, but again, you get very tired of watching the same animation play again and again and again for the same character. Aside from that, you also have either moves, which are your MP moves, which are power ups, strength, whatever. And the way it works is that you can't use your death blows immediately. You have to attack first with a normal attack, and then you get a point of AP or battle point or whatever, and then that allows you to do one of the attacks. And then later on in the game, if you build up 2 AP by doing 2 normal attacks, you then can do a level 2 death blow. And so then it's going to be like, you'll start with square and then do triangle or X or something, so on. And so the way that normal combat, I mean, that's basically normal combat, and the way it really differentiates from mech combat, it's all pretty much the same, honestly, except the mechs have a lot more limited moves. It is interesting, though, in certain areas of the map, you can use your mech where you're supposed to do ground fights, and you can use ground fights where you're supposed to use your mech. And I got filtered on quite a few times. I think there was one part at the end of the game, it was so stupid, where I spawned in this cave, and I was there customizing my gear. I saved an hour ago, and I was customizing my gear, making everything perfect. And I was in my little guy, form, and I realized there's a big cavern. And when I finally finished customizing after like 20 minutes, I went to go save, and decided to spawn a giant griffin. And I tried every move to do escape, because obviously I couldn't kill it, but it just killed me. And so I ended up losing all that progress after reloading my last save and mindlessly go through the previous boss. So that can happen. But you also have situations where you can basically bring your gun or your mech to the knife fight, where you have these tiny little guys who are attacking you, and your mech, you just press triangle, and it just does like 5,000 points of damage. It feels really cool. The only thing I would want from this game, and I'm sure they've done it in the preceding Xenogames, is that I would love a dedicated button to swap to the mech on the field. You unfortunately have to go into the menu, click gear, and click get on, get off for each character. I don't know why you wouldn't have the whole party in Gears and just one off, one on, but it does have that option, which is, I guess, kind of nice. I do have to say about the Gears themselves, they look very cool. They have very cool designs. They have this whole thing where they evolve into Omni Gears. And again, Disc 2 rushes this a lot. It literally was like, oh, by the way, what's his name? Citan, his gear evolved into Fenrir, by the way, just in case you're wondering. It's very similar to Persona, where their personas for the side characters end up evolving in the halfway point. And for a lot of the evolutions into Omni Gears, it just text, because again, Disc 2 is just rushing all of this. But yeah. And the Omni Gears are the ultimate, kind of machines that once you synchronize with your shadow or it or whatever, you fully unlock the power of your gear. And again, that's another, I guess that's technically Freud. The idea where there's a character literally called id, and it's Fei's, it's his shadow basically, or his alter ego, but he's a character in the game that you do fight, and you're like, okay, so am I fighting myself here? Like, what exactly is going on in this scene? Is this like a mental thing where characters are perceiving it differently? But whatever, it occurred. And once you do that, you get the Omni gear. And it's so 90s. It's very Power Rangers coded. I even got the same energy from Legend of Dragoon, even though the Dragoons don't look like Power Rangers. It's the same, or the mechs rather, it's the same energy of we're transforming into my specific color. And so it's not exactly color coded in this one. I mean, there are very distinct colors, but I think there's a couple blue ones, for example, is what I'm saying. But all the mechs have very cool designs, but they very much feel almost like toys. They feel very much like this is a bit of a marketing thing, but it feels really cool. And by the end of the game, everyone has their Omni Gear version where they're evolved. Phase Gear has its ultimate version. And what really hit home for me was you have a rival gang where they end up like, they get so fed up with losing to you all the time, they end up combining their gears Power Ranger style into an ultimate gear. And like just the way the animation that it's formed, it's literally Power Rangers. It's literally Transformers where you combine it all. and whatnot. It's very cool. And yeah, again, the only difference between the gear actual combat is the fact that everything costs fuel and your health. So, I mean, besides from like one character at the very end of the game that can heal you a minimal amount, you cannot. Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry. You can buy certain components that you can exchange fuel for health. But for most of the game, you can't really heal your mech. So it really becomes a test of endurance whenever you do use your mech. And it's very different because when you can't heal, you are very cautious into the amount of battles you get into. Sometimes you're in a dungeon and you're just screwed. Like there's just nothing you can do. You can't heal. You just are literally screwed. There's just nothing you can do. And unfortunately in this game, you also cannot actively swap party members. You have to be at very specific NPCs or very specific points in order to swap party members. You cannot do it on the fly. So if some mech is low on health, like you can't hot swap it out for someone else. Like you were stuck with them basically, which is pretty frustrating and annoying. But yeah, fuel's a resource that it takes to do every kind of attack. I've learned very quickly that what you do in every single battle or every boss battle is you engage booster mode, which burns fuel in every turn, but it allows you to attack twice as fast, which is very much worth it because you're definitely going to run out of health from the enemy before you run out of fuel. And again, by the end of the game, you are maximizing just building the most powerful mech you can. And again, I had to go back to a certain save only by like an hour, simply because I spent my money on the wrong gear. What I thought was the best gear. But it turns out the end game meta, you go to this lighthouse, this random ass lighthouse that had no story significance whatsoever. And you go inside and it's like ancient Tokyo. And they have a little lore like side quest for Emeralda. But you find Big Joe's shop. And Big Joe's kind of this recurring comedic character. And you find his shop. And in that shop is essentially where he's selling you cheating gear. So it's the most expensive gear. It's like $65,000 or yen or whatever per part, which is a lot. Like by the end of the game, you might have, I don't know, 800,000 maybe. So, so for 8 characters, which you do have, if you haven't spent money on anything else, you can just barely equip all your party with best gear. And of course, I spent my money on stuff I already thought was the best gear and not the cheating gear, which was 50,000. So I was like, oh, screw it. So, and I need it for the final boss because it was actually pretty hard. So you have the final things, which give you a tank, which 1,000 units of fuel. And the other thing you need is a GNSR 50, which boosts, it says it boosts your engine by like 50%. But what it really does is it boosts your attack power, if you look at the stats, by like 50%. So you have those two things in charge, you are totally fine. And again, this comes back to what I was talking about with the final boss fight, is that you think, oh yeah, okay, of course you would go out and take out all these mini bosses before the final boss that are optional in order to weaken it. But what you don't account for is that while you can swap party members in that room, which allows you to do, your main character's fuel capacity, which is tied to your health capacity, can't be replenished. So it really does become a gamble as to how many mini bosses you do. I ended up doing one of them, which was the attack one. So I didn't get mogged for 16,000 points of damage when your max HP with everything is still 30. So that's half your health gone. It was a very weird scenario to be in, where it's like, yeah, there actually is an option to, and they kind of say, but they don't say it too clearly, where the payoff for not doing the mini bosses is that you have full health and ammo for the final boss. It really is an interesting trade-off point where unless you have your entire squad equipped with the cheating weaponry, it really does actually make more sense to go straight to the boss and not do all the mini boss shenanigans, because they're not easy either. They're not pushovers. Yeah. And by the end of the game, it's interesting. You still have the open world you can go and visit. It's just that all the previous things, because I thought they would scrap the entire open world, you still have it. Its geography has changed because of explosion or whatever. But there's very few places you can actually go. and all the old places are just totally inaccessible. So I mean, there it is. So yeah, that's basically the whole mech gameplay. The other thing that I should have said beforehand, what was very interesting, is even the overworld gameplay. You think, okay, you just walk around the environment, and it's so funny comparing this game to games like Symphonia and even Final Fantasy like 10 and 13. What really struck me is that we're used to JRPG overworlds being these very confined, restrictive, plastic kind of linear areas where you can't really interact with a lot of stuff in the environments. You can like click A to observe or talk or whatever. In Xenogears, you can jump. You can jump in the environment, and there are sloping surfaces, and there's platforming in this game. In fact, there's a section with platforming with the mech where I wanted to kill myself because it is, oh my god, there's this one section where you're with the mechs and you have to platform, and because you have fixed, well, semi-fixed camera angles, you just don't have any depth perception, and so I had to turn the camera all the way to the right so I would make sure I was perfectly aligned with this rope that I had to swing. And it's this little, like, it's so zoomed out, it's really it's the most frustrating part of the game. It really is. But it is interesting that you can interact with your environment in very interesting ways. You can jump around, and there are a few things. There's only one time you can like collide with the door, but it was showing a type of game where the overworld was just as important as the rest of the game in terms of interactability, which is super big in games of this time, like, I don't know, Ocarina of Time. Like, it's a 3D game where you can interact with everything you see, and we're just used to JRPGs not doing that. But Xenogears really pushed the envelope in terms of, like, yeah, you can jump in this environment and platform. It's like, oh wow, that's actually very cool, because 3D was new, and this was like a new thing that was kind of expected, I guess. So I thought that was very, very interesting and cool. Um, Again, there's just other things I just thought of that also bug me. For example, like when you're in the overworld or in the world map and you're as the mech and you click the run button, you have these boosters show up on the back of your mech, but there's no sound for it. It was really very strange because it seemed like something that should definitely have sound, but just didn't. Anyway, but yeah, the back to the overworld. Another thing I really enjoyed is the sprite animations and also the camera. So again, another thing we're used to having is that JRPGs, they always have fixed cameras. You walk into a town, this is the town camera. You can't really move it around. It's pretty much fixed, or it's in one section. You basically do have a free camera in Xenogears, but it's actually set on a 8-point axis all around the character for 360 degrees in most areas. And what's really cool is that because the sprites in the world, they are sort of working off the Doom technology, if you understand what I mean. Like, it only works at certain angles, but every time it shifts angles, all the things in the environment, all the objects, and all the character models shift perspective. So you can see Fei at 8 specific perspectives throughout the entire experience of the game, and the way he moves is also very fluid. It's a very cool thing that definitely is not necessary, but you can tell it's an early 3D game. They're really trying to figure out, okay, what is it we actually have to do here? What's expected of us? And it's just so interesting how lazy, by comparison, JRPGs have gotten with their overworld. It's like, yeah, this is like a fantasy town, whatever. Can you interact with anything? No. You can examine it. You can, like, talk to the dog, but that's it. Can you jump? Why would you need to jump? Are you crazy? This isn't Skyrim. So it's really interesting how much innovation there is in Xenogears environments and just the overworld. And even in the overworld, there's little puzzles to do. You can explore to find treasure chests in the dungeons and stuff. It just feels a lot more interactive, or at least the idea that a lot more of the game would take place in the overworld than rather than loading in battles. And it works pretty much the exact same way as Final Fantasy games do, where random encounters, you're walking around a room, suddenly you're in a random encounter, the screen shatters, and it loads up a battle sequence. So it's pretty standard in that sense. And just on that too, the sprites themselves, they are very timeless. Like I was looking at this thinking, is this new technology? Like this game could have been made yesterday. The way it looks, it's so fluid and interesting, and the sprites look great. Also, the character portraits look great. There's a lot of things in this game that feel very ageless, and they feel very, very classical. Again, when it comes to the actual combat to combat, whatever, it's nothing really great. It's very kind of standard, I guess. When you think about turn-based games, they either really hit that sweet spot or they don't. Something like a Paper Mario, it's very much locked in to feeling good. But for here, it was very passable. And it's funny because, again, the gameplay and the combat is not the main component of the story. It was so interesting that this was probably the first time in the mid-90s when you could have a 60-hour game. And the question is, should you have a 60-hour game? How long should the story be? How complex should it be? And they realized that eventually, I mean, I think the last really long game that I can recall is Folklore on the PS3, which wasn't even a JRPG. It was a kind of like a combat heavy driven game with story, obviously. But there's just a certain amount of time that gamers just get tired of, their games. They just, I don't want to play a game for 60 hours. I don't care how good it is. But it just brought me back to this time in game history where there was such a motivation. It was almost like a selling point to say, yeah, this game is 60 hours long and it is a crazy, crazy story that feels like a TV show, and it just goes on and on and on. And at that time, that was a huge selling point. It's like, what is the most crazy, complex story we could get out of a game or into a game? And Xenogears definitely pushed that envelope, and to the point where the story was convoluted and disjointed and rushed by the end of it. But they did it. That being said, even though there's this love and attention poured into the environments, or the interactability or potential interactability with the environments, because the game is so linear, because it's telling a very story-heavy driven game, you don't spend a lot of time in these environments. You don't really get to see them change. They're kind of there as set dressing, and once you've exited them, you don't really remember them. So the actual world of Xenogears, when I think about it, is not super impressive, but the characters, the lore, the mechs and the gears and the civilizations, I guess the only memorable places are probably maybe the Church of Nissan and the floating cities, honestly, and the final areas. But a lot of it is just to be like, yeah, we're in this area to tell the story. The environment itself isn't really super important. You're not going to come back here. In fact, they blow up one of them, so obviously they don't really care. But it's cool to see it, but the actual environment itself isn't super memorable. It's not like a village and like in Zelda we can interact with everything. But I guess other thing to talk about, sound design. The sound design, sound effects are pretty good. They're all decent. They're all like, very, I'd say, pretty iconic to the Xenogears series. Whatever. Again, there are some weird things, like your mechs or boosters are in full thrust, and the world mapping just, there's no sound effect for that. It's just very off-putting, very weird. It is funny though. There's this one like dolphin guy in your ship who is basically an Easter egg where he lists a bunch of random sound effects from the game, which I think is pretty funny. The save icon sound effect is very iconic. The party change sound effect is very iconic. So that's all there. That's all fine. I would say that gets a pass. What is kind of an issue, though, which again ties into the filler aspect, is that the game's soundtrack, it is good. It's fine. But when you have like 40 hours in the middle where you're just doing stuff, you just end up hearing the same song over and over and over again. Oh no, we're going into battle. Oh no, there's tension. Oh no, a sad scene. And it's the same song every single time. I had this exact same problem with Final Fantasy XIV, where they've done 6 expansions and have not changed the villain plotting music. Doesn't matter what villain it is or who it is, it's the same plotting music. And I just roll my eyes every single time that I know Right, okay, we're going into battle. I get it. And when you do get a new song, it's like, oh, okay, this is interesting. Suddenly I'm paying attention. I think when you get to like the ancient cities, it's like, oh, okay, this is interesting now. So again, for an average 30-hour game, the soundtrack is I think fine and suited for that. But for a 60-hour game and all that filler stuff in between, like I need new songs, man. I cannot keep listening to Steel Giant or we're going into battle again. It got very tiresome and to the point where your brain just kind of turns off because it's like, okay, I need to just deal with the next boss so I can get to the next area to find out, whatever. And it just became so cliche through a lot of it. So it's a good and bad thing. And the overall music itself in Xenogears, it's good, it's orchestral, it's fine, I guess. I will say though that the love theme is that hits me hard. That the end of the game when they were pulling that out for the scenes in the dialogue, it was very, very warranted. It was like, yeah, okay, no, you've earned this song to use it like this. But the rest of the songs I can't say the same. It just got very tiresome. And even the ending song, I had the same experience with Castlevania Symphony of the Night where it was like Disney R&B for the credit song. It's like, I guess like Castlevania was way weirder because it's gothic horror, so it made no sense whatsoever. I think it was like Just the Wind or whatever or something. But here it's kind of like, okay, it kind of is like a happy-ish Disney ending, I guess. I could somehow see, but it still felt very odd or whatever. I guess on the ending of the game, yeah, I don't know. I don't really have any complaints. I think it was fine. It was just a little bit confusing. So did the guy end up leaving or whatever? Like he said, and then Faye and Ellie and they're all and like everyone's happy, everyone's fine, everyone's celebrating, and they all kind of got through it, so to speak. I don't know. I mean, they had an opportunity to do something really spicy there with the fact that the things exploding, going off to space, are like, oh no, Ellie's sacrificing herself to save everyone, just like she did 500 years ago, or her ancestor, or whatever. And I was like, oh no, this would be really cool if that actually happened. But no, they have a happy ending. It's like, oh shucks. Anyway, I would have preferred the other way, honestly. I would have preferred the other way. Final Fantasy VII did it with Aerith. Persona 3 did it with main character. Really, really sold that ending, by the way. It totally impacted Persona 3 with that ending. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's fine. The ending, everyone's happy. I won't complain, but I think there's been some potential to do something really cool there with that. But it's fine. Everyone's fine. I don't know. I guess another weird gimmick or weird thing that I noticed in this game is that unlike any other PS1 game I've played, and I've played a lot of the library at this point, when you go to save, it allows you to access your whole memory card. So you're not just overwriting Xenogears saves. You could accidentally overwrite another save, which, I mean, I guess it's cool for data management. You could do it right there in Xenogears. You can copy and delete and overwrite files. But I don't think you'd ever want to do that from the Xenogears save menu. It's like, I'm here just to save Xenogears data. I can do that other stuff from the console menu. I don't need to do that. But it was like a weird gimmick, I guess, that I also noticed. I guess I know the last thing to mention, the animations on the special moves are pretty cool. Funnily enough, in the battles, they still definitely have more of a sprite-based 2D style to them, while the mechs are kind of fully 3D. So, I don't know, I felt like, I don't know, comparatively to other Square games, like Final Fantasy, Legend of Dragoon, when you pull off an ultimate move, it feels just massive, this massive, cutscene and just 10,000 points of damage. Like, oh, that's so cool. Here you don't really have a lot of those animations. It's kind of like, yeah, you just hit the enemy for a lot of points. The only exception being, I think, Fei's final move, which is some like gravity lens beam thing, which shoots a laser and blows up Earth. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that's cool, I guess, and does like 2,000 points of damage when like a strong normal attack is 3,000. So whatever. Yeah, there were a lot of moves that like Bart's like coin flip move that just didn't do a lot of damage, and I thought, when would I ever use this? And the answer that I got was never. You never use this because you just do normal attacks. So I don't know. There's that. I really do like the cast of characters. I really like Billy because he's all about guns and he's a priest. I don't know. He's a cool thing going on there. Again, I felt like there was maybe a missed boat for character backstories where you introduce the character and then in the second half you kind of do their backstory. So like Emeralda, you go to the lighthouse and you find out, oh, you already know she's a nanomachine entity, but it goes into more detail that her father and mother were scientists in Japan developing her made out of nanomachines. So it's like you have one cutscene talking about that, and that's it. So there's just so much, I think, it's missed potential for really fleshing out the characters and making them more than just side characters. Ellie and Fei are very well written. They have a lot of very interesting dialogue, especially at the end and beginning of the game. Bart, I really don't care for Bart. And it was very weird to listen to his voice at the end of the game. He was very rough and gravelly, and I was like, oh, that's weird. And that's the other thing too. Technically the characters do have voices, but you just never hear them. You might hear them in the beginning of the game during an anime cutscene, at the end of the game, again, anime cutscene. And the other weird part is they introduced this very addictive card game near the end of disc 2, where if you lose or you win, the character has a voice line, and you just forgot, oh right, they can talk, they sound like that. It would always be better if they didn't have a voice line there, or only in cutscenes, because it really throws you off. Like, oh, that's what they're supposed to sound like? Oh, that's so different in my head this whole time. So either I think you go full mute the whole time, or you just have it during cutscenes. I don't know. It was very weird. And yeah, so I was talking about Emeralda. So she's this, cute little girl that, like, she just shows up. I thought she was supposed to be like part of the main plot, but no, you just rescue her because she's one of the animas that they need to integrate with. Yeah, Bart's character, I don't dislike his character, but his character coincides with the point in the story where I just stopped really caring, and it became all about politics and people who's fighting who and stuff like that. So it's like I'm not wild or crazy about him. You have Citan the Doctor. I actually do really like him because he's definitely like a guide kind of character, and it does tease the fact that he's in cahoots with the Emperor or communication with the Emperor. So you're really not sure where he's aligned. So he's a very interesting character. I actually do like Citan quite a lot. And like all of the characters from Solaris, they have an alternate name. So his alternate name is Hyuga. And I don't know, I find that very cool that characters have multiple names depending on where they're from and who knows them. The main cast. Oh my god, I'm blanking out. You have Billy and who's the big guy? The guy who looks like Blanca. You know who I am. The guy who's literally Blanca because he was raised in a sewer and he's a mutant. Rico Banderas. Yeah, he's fine, I guess. He's a fine character. Not much to say about him though. It's just like, okay, he's a mutant and he's strong, and yeah, okay. Like, that's it, really. Oh yeah, and you also have Mary and the Furball. Mary, she again shows up very much near the end, and she's like, hey, I'm the Guardian of Shavat, and then she joins you, and that's it. Again, I would love to see, side content for these characters. And the Furball, which the Chew character, and since I'm playing this game in current year, it's weird that it's the one character you can name. You can't name any other character in the game, which is odd because in Final Fantasy VII you could do that. But I named the pink Furball, I named it Labubu. So every time I saw Labubu, it cracked me up a little bit, and it definitely suited the character, honestly, when you came down to it. But yeah, just in terms of side content for these characters and what they're all about, I don't know. I just kept thinking though that despite all my gripes with this game, I think it'd be so great to retell it and again implement those story components near the end as little hints or Easter eggs or columns or checkpoints in the main section of the game. Because I do think, regardless of all the things I've said, at the end of the day, I think this would be a great remake. In the same way that Final Fantasy VII is getting the remake uh, method or treatment, I think Xenogears would really, really benefit and really vibe with that kind of content because at the same time, it is very much a movie game. And Final Fantasy Remake, yeah, there's gameplay and it looks very flashy, but it doesn't feel very important, if you know what I mean. Like, if you lose a battle, it's not a huge deal. In Xenogears, when you lose a battle, you lose a battle. You know, you have to go back, last cutscene, whatever. Here, it's the gameplay and the new remasters, they just kind of feel like, I don't know, dressing for the game, if you know what I mean. It's just supposed to look flashy, not supposed to really be really hard. And Xenogears already is kind of a movie game where it's just like giving you an experience. I think seeing all these characters and cutscenes and battles in HD would be really cool. And I think it would actually lend itself more to the strengths of Xenogears because I already said it's already trying to tell you a story rather than be a game. And I think as a remake, I was just going through all the different components and scenarios of what would the characters sound like? How would the dialogue work? How would you section out the game? Would you divide it into 2 discs or 3 sections? How would the overworld work? I just think there's so many different interesting components, along with looking at what they're doing with Final Fantasy VII Remake, that Xenogears would do so well as a remake. I just can't not think about it occasionally. It's just such a good idea, I think. And I don't even think you have to do the whole time goes thing because, again, I am suggesting you do change the ending part of the game where you implement a lot more of the story components at the beginning of the game. But again, there's a point at the disc 2 where they're literally sitting you down and telling you what's happening. That would translate very well into a remake story game. Like, you can just like sit back and like get the story. It's like perfect. And they won't even have to have a PowerPoint because now you can just animate it. And we could fill in all those missing scenes. And it's like great. But you wouldn't have to really change anything about the story. You don't need the time ghost because the whole point of Final Fantasy VII Remake is that it's a fan fiction. It really is a fan fiction because it's changing literally everything and putting fan energy into it and changing certain main story components and even teasing Sephiroth like 5 minutes into the opening of the game, or the first hour at least. So, yeah. Anyway, I digress. I'm just saying I think Xenogears as a remaster, or a remake rather, I think it would do very well. And I think it'd be something that Square should definitely think about doing, or Square Enix. I don't know how the licensing works. So there's a lot of things to talk about, very interesting concepts, very interesting themes that I wish we spent more time with developing and just weren't rushed in the final like hour of this game that we could have developed or looked at. I kind of almost want to re-watch the last part of this game because there were so many interesting features in there that, again, you've seen a lot of other JRPGs about God, about the idea of spirituality, of machine and human, and the barrier between those two things. And spirituality in general, and also lore and Christian, Jewish backdrop, a mix along with psychology. I think the most interesting thing that they really hit home that I didn't even really think about, even in a spiritual religious context, is the entity, or the, what do they call it? The embracer, or the contact, or whatever. It was basically saying that, in the beginning, in the very beginning of, before Genesis, before the earth was formed, if God really existed, or gods really existed, then what you're really talking about is consciousness, and the separation of the waters is a separation of egos. And this is very, again, on the line of Evangelion, but I think it actually described it better in this thing, where it said, in the beginning, there was a separation of consciousness that manifested the universe. Just this, it's something that even mentioning that, I mean, this whole, God killing theme has been done to death in a lot of JRPGs, even up until Persona 5 as of recently. But those kinds of ideas are still just unmentioned. They're very unique, and Xenogears definitely has a foothold on those concepts. Again, being something that's kind of very obviously pulled from Evangelion, it's something that we just have not seen. No one has had the balls or the intellect to rediscover or revisit these ideas, and I find it super, super interesting. Again, a lot of it's just pulling from the Bible, like, oh yeah, Adam and Eve and Genesis and the Garden of Eden. But at the end of the game, it starts cooking with some new stuff that's not just referential. It's innovating on those things. And it's not just borrowing names, it's actually cooking something at the end of the game. And then by the time you have an idea of what it's doing, it ends. It's like, oh, well, shucks. But yeah, very interesting game. Very interesting facet how it launched its sister series of Xenosaga and Xenoblade as of recently, which is now considered a Gunner game. But hey, you have Nier Automata doing the exact same thing, being an existentialist Gunner game that you wouldn't know unless you played it. So I've dabbled in the other Xeno games. I've never really liked them, but maybe after playing Xenogears, I might get into them. I know Xenosaga is something I definitely wanted to revisit one day, and after playing this game, I think I have the the ammunition and the spiritual literary knowledge to actually go into Xenogears and be like, oh, okay, I see what they're doing. Or into Xenosaga, rather. Anyway, that's pretty much all I want to say about this. I'm gonna end it here on a nice note. This is one of those brain expanding experiences, but just having this game under my belt, not only from its content, but just the fact it's one of the most acclaimed, big-brained, pretentious or intellectual series or games ever made. It feels really good to have my own take, my own vision, and my own experience on it. It just feels like a good milestone. And with this, I have only one more game left on my PS1, and it feels good to kind of finish off that library with this experience. It feels very climactic and final. Anyway, with that being said, I think I've talked long enough, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.